Hello everybody, warm welcome to this S&OP Masterclass from Rheuma and from Perito IBP. My name is Søren Pedersen, I'll be your host for this podcast here today. The purpose of these S&OP Masterclasses is to dive into hot and trending topics within supply chain planning, give you our perspective on them, see what we see from our clients at the moment, and hopefully give you some tips and tricks that you can utilize in your own daily planning back home. Today's topic is no different. We are looking at inventory reduction, how to reduce working capital, a topic that is very hot at the moment out in many companies. If you haven't seen it, the last podcast was around this planning exercise. What is it for a situation that companies find themselves in at the moment, getting this task from the CEOs to reduce inventories, to reduce working capital? Please go back and get updated there. But on this episode here today, we are diving more into the topic of the supply chain assessment, an area that we established last time is quite crucial for the success of these transformation projects. So we're going to dive into deep water here today to talk about what are the elements of these supply chain assessments. And as usual, and as the last time, I'm not alone in the studio. I brought my very good colleague, Benjamin Obling. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you.
We can't be sure that everybody saw the last podcast. We of course expect to, but we can't be sure. But just for the new listeners out there, could you please give a short introduction? Who is Benjamin?
Yeah, my name is Benjamin Obling. I'm CEO of Perito IBP.
Good. Well established. Let's dive into the topics. We're going to be very concrete here today and talk about the supply chain assessment. Just to a short recap in terms of what we established last time, we talked about what are the elements when you get this quite crucial task of getting the inventories or getting the working capital down, but not losing any of the good things in the company in the same process. So how to do it in a balanced way. And we established that, okay, we need to analyze the situation, we need to get fact-based, we need to make a business supply chain assessment, make a good rollout plan and a good business case for that, and of course get the project started. But getting into the business, the supply chain assessment. First question, of course, from people will be, what exactly is a supply chain assessment?
Yeah, so an assessment, the supply chain assessment, is where we go into to a company and then find out what is the potential in optimizing the inventories, the working capital, balancing it, because that's really the key word here is balancing the inventories with the commercial perspectives and the net working capital. So what you do in the assessments is that you build up a model of the reality, you could say, like a digital twin, and then see, okay, if we optimize on the demand planning side, how much can we improve that? And you do that at a very detailed level and data driven. So it's not like an overall benchmark, because you can't really do that operational to very much. You can't use it. You look at the demand planning and then say, okay, can you improve that? And then turn to the inventory planning, saying, okay, can we optimize inventory levels? So right now, a lot of focus on reducing the inventory levels, but really the focus here is balancing. Maybe you increase it on some, maybe you decrease it on others to right size and balance the inventories. And then also it's possible then to look further on in the supply and see, okay, in terms of capacity, etc., are there any optimizations you can do there? But really getting the business case around improving supply chain planning with a facts-based business case.
Okay, so really quite a structured process, actually, with the end result ending up in a recommendation, a business plan, and actually maybe even more concrete, like the picture of what kind of transformation, where are we now, where should we be in X amount of time. How to get there.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really both about getting up into the helicopter and then say, okay, what are the overall issues in supply chain planning that we have in the company? How can we address those? And then going all the way down to the single item level and be able to, we say, land the helicopter to go to the lowest level, because that's really where you need to prove your case and say, yes, we can improve it. And these at this very detailed item level, for example. And then when you summarize all of those potentials, okay, this is the total potential you get. Okay, is there enough in order can we justify to move on? And then if yes, okay, so let's set out the plan. And based on the fact-based business case here, you'll also see, okay, what are then the levers? What is it we need to do? What is the diagnostic of the supply chain planning? What do we need to do to optimize it?
Okay. But of course, listeners will say, okay, but you have to start somewhere. So where do you start here in this, if we take them step by step here? I guess it's all about data in the beginning, or how do you see when getting started with this assessment?
Yeah, there's usually some lead time on getting the data, and we're pretty sure in most cases on what data we need to do. So that's why we start with the data to get that rolling. That would be things like we need the historical sales down to item level and date and quantity, etc. on different markets. We need to know what the inventory levels are, also at a very detailed level. What are the different lead times, MOQ? So there are a lot of sets of planning data and transactional data that we know for sure we are going to need. So that track will get started pretty fast, so we can make sure that the lead time doesn't become a bottleneck for us later in the project. And then very fast after that, jumping into the overall business requirements, so to make sure up in the helicopter again, and then say, okay, so what is the overall pain here that we are addressing? Obviously, we're addressing inventory optimization and balancing. That's the whole purpose. But how does the stocking strategy look, for example? So how can we enable the company to align between the commercial side of the optimization and then the operational side in terms of working capital, etc. So what are the overall business objectives that we are aiming at?
Yeah, so you're looking at the first step is both basically strategy and data. Maybe one question on the data. I think the first question I would think of is, do I need perfect data? Do I have the data I need? Do we need all my data? How do you usually experience that, and what do we recommend here?
Yeah. So the perfect data is always a big problem because you don't have perfect data. I'm almost certain to be able to ensure that, or to assure you that. I can also ensure. But you could say that what we can always see that we have lacking master data that is not super crisp, etc. And if you want to wait and insist on waiting until master data, all the planning parameters, etc., are optimal before you make an assessment like this, you'll never get started. So, you have the data and the data quality you have, and you gotta live with that for some period and then get started. So there we extract the data with whatever quality it has. Then we try to quantify when if you have low data quality. An example could be the MOQ. So what is the minimum order quantities that you purchase? Example, that is a master data field that you would need in order to create proposals, and that we need in order to optimize the supply chain planning. Very specific example. If that field is not really maintained, so it's maintained on some and not others, etc., what we can do then is to assess it. So we go back in time and then we look at what have you actually purchased. So how much, what are the quantities that you're normally purchasing? Okay, you're purchasing 100, then sometimes 150, and then 80 and 100. Okay, so it's probably 100. In the master data, it says 500. Okay, so in this case, we're pretty sure because we have 5 observations, 4 of them 100. The rest, the remaining 1 is pretty close, or 2 pretty close. Okay, so we'll go with 100 instead of the 500. So you could say there are ways to get past the lacking master data, because we need to assess something and then say, okay, yeah, maybe it's not 100, maybe it was actually 150, and the times with 100 was wrong. Okay, but at least 100 is a lot better than using 500. So let's start, look at it, then create some alerts as part of the assessment of saying, okay, so the master data quality here is X%, and this is really here you have the list of what you need to start and fix and correct.
Yeah,
and then you get started.
And what about another point is it a sample of data, or is it you need the full Monday to do anything here? What's normal for you?
Yeah, we normally recommend to have quite a big sample because you need to be able to cover as much of the company so you know in confidence that this business case will actually pull through. So we actually do have enough. We cover. So let's say we cover 70-80% of the working capital. Okay, then we're sure that this is we have something here that we can actually extrapolate to the rest. If you take a very small sample and do some few examples there and extrapolate, you might be recommending something which is completely wrong. On the other hand, if you have say really poor master data in one small area, it's not covering a lot, you can leave it out and then say, okay, we'll cover 80%, and that's enough to establish that we do have a case.
Okay.
But normally we do it with hundreds of thousands of materials because a lot of this is automated analysis process. So it's something that we can analyze with quite large bulks of data.
Okay. And then you mentioned, of course, the stocking strategy as a starting point, actually before we do any assessment. But don't you experience sometimes that the strategy is lacking, basically, and it becomes part of the assessment almost to have this? Or is it just a crisp world out there with a nice, pretty strategies all along?
Yeah, we touched a bit upon it in the previous podcast, and yes, it is surprisingly often that there is not a clear strategy. You could say one way to go by it here would be to say, okay, on all the, for example, if we talk about the stocking strategy, on all the items where we do have a safety stock or so basically a make-to-stock strategy right now, we will see if we can optimize those levels. So we don't change the scope, we don't change the stocking strategy. Say, okay, so that is like an as-is situation. Can we optimize that? In many cases, yes, it needs to be increased in some, decreased in others. Net effect is often a decrease in inventory. So that could be one set of say outcome of that. Then the next step could be, okay, what if we challenge the stocking strategy and then say, okay, do we have some items, some markets where we don't have a target stock right now? Would that make sense to take in? What would that cost us? What would that decrease in dry runs? And on the other hand, on all the ones where we have a stocking policy now and we would like to be make to stock, which ones of those should be taken out potentially? And we can also calculate that. So we can make different scenarios in that, saying, okay, with a given as-is scenario, let's see what the potential is. What if we start to challenge the assumptions around the stocking policy?
Yeah. And I think, of course, why I also mention it is that if it's something that we as a supply chain professional need to be aware of, it can be quite dangerous, I guess, to just take whatever stocking strategy there is in the company or is in the ERP system made like 4 years ago, which is a normal situation, and just running with that. It needs to be part of this assessment to at least evaluate and analyze what do we have on the shelf at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That is the recommendation, but also knowing that here you're really entering also a large area, because making that full alignment across the company with sales, operations, CFO, etc., down to the single item level, that can be a pretty big task. So you need to make some assumptions around that stocking policy, and then you can still build a pretty solid business case.
At least highlight where you see the problem and not try to fix everything in the assessment.
Exactly.
That's good advice. Then I guess we have the data. We have talked about the strategy. Then first part of the assessment, looking at the demand, I guess, finding out how that is. How do you do that step in these assessments?
Yeah, so what we do is we roll back time, so to say. So that could be like a year, rolling back time a year from now. So we have all the sales data, say, for the last 3 or 4 years. Then we roll back time, because we cannot, of course, we need to see how is the company performing in terms of forecast accuracy, and how could we potentially perform in using an optimized approach. So how much can we reduce the forecast errors or improve forecast accuracy? And in order to do that, we need to do it in parallel. So we need to say, okay, this is the automated, the new optimized demand forecast for the period. This is the company's proposal or the company's forecast, actual forecast. And then what is the sales for that month, for example, on that item. And then we calculate the accuracy. That's what we want to do. And we want to do that for multiple months. But the thing is, we don't want to wait multiple months because we want to have a short decision process. And that's where the rollback time come in the picture. Because what we do is then we go, these say 12 months back, and then we start to do the forecast with that actual. And then we say, okay, so if we roll back to January this year, and then say, okay, we had all the data, all the sales data until December last year. Now we do the forecast for January and onwards. And then we take one actual month in, say, okay, then we get the actual of January. Then we do the forecast again for February onwards. So we actually do the same as what the company has been doing for the last 12 months, for example. Without, of course, knowing the future. Otherwise, it would be cheating and and absolutely worthless. So in doing that, we can then, once we've sort of went through the time, just speed it up, then we can compare, okay, so on the single item number, January, February, etc., what was the client's, the company's forecast? What was the actual sales and the accuracy there? What was the optimized forecast and what was the actual, and then what is that forecast accuracy? And then looking across all of these different, say, thousands of items and different months with different offsets. So how much time before did we make the forecast, etc. All of that is something we can configure and measure. Then we can see, okay, so what was the actual forecast accuracy? That was, say, 60. It can improve to 70, as an example. Okay, so is that worth enough for the company to so that's the potential. Yeah. Is that worth enough for the company, which is then in the inventory analysis to show?
Yeah, because I guess the link to the inventories here is if we can improve the forecast, then we can reduce the safety stock.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you get a one-to-one. You could say that you direct when you reduce the uncertainty in the future by having a better forecast, you can reduce the target inventory, the safety stock, the buffer. So that's why it will impact the service levels positively or working capital positively.
So I guess not every, but most assessments you see will have an improvement here. We can typically improve the forecasting.
Yeah. Yes. You could see the cases where you don't have improvements would be in the cases where you have a lot of market intelligence. So if it's very project driven, so a very few projects that you really need to nail and you don't have a lot of repeated sales, then it can be the case that it's important to have a strong market intelligence input. But even in like fashion, fast-moving, let's say fast-changing environments like fashion, we normally see that we can improve accuracy. So you don't need a lot of history and repeated sales before it actually makes sense.
Okay.
So make a combination of the algorithm-based optimized forecast and then the market intelligence input.
Yeah. Okay. But then we have the demand in place, vital part of the assessment. But the big one, of course, being inventory analysis, suppliers analysis in this assessment.
Yeah.
Basically, how do you go about that elephant?
Chopping up the elephant in pieces, I guess. But one step in doing that is to build a digital twin or simulation of reality, what we call Monte Carlo simulation. So we build up a model of reality. So that means whatever lead times the customer have on the single item numbers, extracting that data, obviously as before, using that in the model. What is the lead time uncertainty? If we do have that variance, we've seen that a lot, and variance going down now, fortunately, but still being relevant. We have the MOQs as example. We have the past sales. That's the uncertainty on the demand, of course, together with the past forecast and the optimized forecast, and a range of other input parameters that will go into this simulation. Then we will simulate reality as if we were a planning or an MRP system, planning according to that forecast, according to the safety stock we are simulating. And we do that a lot of weeks, so week by week into the future, a bit like with the forecasting. So doing what would in reality happen. And when we do that a lot of times with different target stocks, then we can optimize, okay, so what is actually giving us the best outcome, the best result on this single item level. And then we get a outcome of saying, what is the what do we need to require for working capital if we have 95% service level? What about 96, 7, 8, 9, etc. So different service level intervals. That means afterwards we can summarize all of that and then say, okay, for the whole company, what is then actually the impact of going from 99 to 98 or to 97, etc. How much impact will that give us? Or we could let the algorithm optimize the financial business case on the single SKU by itself to say, okay, so with the gross profit of X on this item, with this uncertainty, with the lead time uncertainty, etc., and we're simulating, we have this gross profit. So when we go stock out, we lose our gross profit, of course, minus possible back orders, and then say, okay, so what is then the lost sales we have? The cost of that, and what is the working capital, and what is the cost of capital of that, and then what is the financial optimal solution to do. And that will calculate and say 97. That is, from a financial point of view, the best service level.
Okay, so basically all about balancing and optimizing all the planning parameters the company has within this area.
Yeah.
But building, of course, our listeners have to think about, okay, this has to go into a business case, or I need to show some potential. And just for example, you get different potential depending on service levels in the company. And we just established also that not a lot of companies have this really firm, fixed stocking strategy. What do you do then in the business case here? Do you just assumptions, or what? How do you handle that uncertainty around what is the right level, what is the right potential here?
Yeah, so then we can set different scenarios. So one scenario could be if we have the same service level as we have now, so the historical service level for the company, what would then be the inventory reduction that we can do? So that could be one. If we maintain that service level, then we can reduce by X%, for example. One scenario. Another scenario would be, okay, what if we actually spend some of that working capital reduction in improved service level? So how many stock out situations could we avoid, and how much service levels could we increase as a different scenario? And then it's really up for the management to take a look at the different scenarios and then see, okay, from a financial point of view, pure financial point of view, this would be optimum. Okay, but we want to push it a bit further up in service level, or because we have let's say we want to improve our revenue. Now we are really all about growth, etc. Okay, so we want to push that up a bit, even though financially maybe it's not optimal, but on the long run it will because of strategic decisions. Or you have a short-term situation where you're really lacking cash, so you need to bring down the inventories, even though financially optimal, it would be 97, for example, will go down to 95 in a shorter period because we have some strategic initiatives.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that even though that we can present the fact, there's also in many cases a strategic decision to be made afterwards. What is the right level of actions for our company in sense? So it's not a fixed from the assessment necessarily. No. And it's maybe because it ends up being a figure you need to put into the material master in the supply chain planning for the MRP. I mean, this sounds super boring, but it really should have more attention from top management, because this is a strategic decision in my point of view. Okay, how do you want to serve your customers? What is the experience they should have? How often should they have experience a dry run? How much can you increase revenue if you reduce the dry runs, and how much can you reduce working capital? I mean, that is strategic decisions that should be on C-level attention, and it is in many cases. Now we talked about, of course, much about the inventories, but what about the raw materials or the components going in the supply side of things? Do we have those in these assessments as well, typically, or is it something that you typically leave out?
If we have either big issues with the raw materials or semi-finished, or big potential in the footprint of pushing the inventories up or downstream, or you have a big working capital basically on raw materials, then certainly yes, that should be included in the analysis, and that's also possible. Then you would take out the outbound consumption of the raw materials. So you would look at, for this raw component, for example, it's used in 10 or 20 different bill of materials, so production orders for those semi-finished or finished are using this raw material. So what is the uncertainty? What is the consumption that we see, and what is the variance and uncertainty in that? And then you can optimize the safety stocks according to that.
Yeah. Okay, so we have this step was, of course, building the whole analysis, getting down to the single SKU, really having the facts on the table. But then you have to present it, I guess. It's the next step, breaking down the potential, building the business case. What is your recommendation? How you go about doing that typically?
Yeah, normally we would have two different ways of presenting it. Where one is like the overall insight, so of the analysis. So that would normally be an analysis presented PowerPoint level, where you look at the total. What is the total impact here that we can gain? The improvement of the forecast accuracy in total. Break it down so we understand why is it one lucky punch, or is it actually a consistent improvement, etc. And also with the working capital. So that's the sort of the report, you could say, PowerPoint, but then also showing it, demonstrating it directly in the tool itself, so that the company can see, okay, we can get in the helicopter, but we can also land the helicopter. We can demonstrate right down to the single item level that, yes, this means that on this item level, we had 100 of safety stock, we should have 7 instead, or whatever, if it's a huge reduction. And when you summarize all of that, you'll get in the total business case of that. But the reason for being, very specific and being able to go all the way down to the single item level is also to validate the business case. Because the planners here, we need to be able to present different cases of big reductions and potentials, where they sort of need to nod and say, yeah, I can see that. We could actually reduce this 200 safety stock to 150, for example. That would make sense. I can see that. Because if they sort of are able to say, yeah, okay, but in this case, it doesn't make sense because X, Y, Z. And in the next case, it also doesn't make sense because then there is no business case. And then maybe we can show something in PowerPoint, but then we can't operationalize it afterwards if you can't take it all the way down.
No. And I think maybe a key word you said there was tool. Because automation and how to make this stick. I think, I hope you agree that a vital point here is that we need to be aware that this is not a one-shot analysis. Of course it is. You get a picture on and some recommendation out of it. But also a vital part of this assessment is to elaborate on how to make this stick in real life afterwards. And make it work 9, 10, 12 months down the road.
Yeah, and that's really where you could say one thing is the report, the presentation, which is basically the only thing it should do is to say, do we move forward? Does it make sense? Is there a business case? Yes or no? Let's set the business case and let's realize it. The next part on actually doing it, that's showing it in the tool, which means, okay, now we can see, yes, we can actually do this. We can do it all the way down to the lowest level. But then in the next phase, also taking that and then combining it with the process, saying, okay, so what is it that we actually need to do and change in our everyday life to make this work? And how do we implement it afterwards in using it? But when you see the link between the business case all the way down to, this is where you change the demand forecast, this is where you change the target service levels, the process part and starting to live it is a lot easier because you can see it. It's a set of concrete tasks. Even though it sounds, we need to make a transformation of the supply chain. Okay, yes, but so what do I do on Monday morning when I get to work? This is what you do on Monday morning. You go into this part of the tool, you coordinate with sales, and that would be Peter from, product launch, etc., and so on. So then you can make it more specific because otherwise it will just, again, be one report. You'll have a lot of focus on it. Inventories probably go down, but they'll sure go up again.
I guess just my thought process working here on what you just said in terms of the change management and making a stack. I guess the facts on the table also helps you here. Like you have to go out now, and of course, one thing is to persuade the management. That can be done with a business case in many cases. I'm generalizing a bit here. But you also have to persuade an organization afterwards to do something different and to use a tool and to use automation. I guess the facts on the table here, they can actually see it in the system, and they can see what we did before and what we do now helps in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And but I mean, there's no reason to that we should kid ourselves and each other that this is tricky. I mean, it is tricky to change, and it is a change management task. Obviously, to change. Planners have been used to doing things in a certain way, and now they're going to do things in a different way. And I think really the key is, as you say here, is to be able to show it concrete with examples and taking it all the way down to the single level where they can see, okay, yes, that actually does make sense. And then also having the respect for the planners in knowing they have knowledge that is not in the model or might not be in the model. So how do we make sure that knowledge is either incorporated into the model, or we make sure that they have the time and focus to take care of that additional parts that they have of knowledge that we need to take into account, instead of just automating it completely and then saying, okay, then have the planners doing something else. Yeah. That's normally not the right case, because there are still so much in the supply chain, so many moving parts that you need the planners in there. But you can just hand them over the torch, you can say, so much closer to the finish line than what normally happens in the companies.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful final statement on the assessment part, that we need to. Of course, we have all these improvements, but we need to respect the organization and know the organization and work with the organization as well to make this stick in real life. Before diving into the final topic, just summarizing the assessment, what you say is that we need the data in. Of course, not necessarily everything, but enough to make the assessment. We need to focus on the stocking strategy, demand planning assessment, inventory supply planning assessment, break down the potential, build the business case, remember the organization and the automation in that process.
And maybe just adding one thing to that is to separate on the inventory optimization, how much is parameter driven and how much is behavior driven, so that when we see a potential in reducing the inventories, it will to some extent be the parameters, and what we mean by the planning parameters like safety stock or MOQs. So creating the proposals for the planner. And then the other part is, what does the planners actually do? So there is this behavioral side of it. Yeah. And that's really important, and also to have specific tools to address that behavior. And that's really also where we get the inputs from the planner when they're doing something else than the system, the automated proposal. They're changing that. Why are they changing it? Should we have a feedback loop to the automated, to the model, or do we actually need to, in that case, respect they have some knowledge that we cannot incorporate into the model? But if we don't get a grip of the behavior, it won't change.
No. And I think that a beautiful transition to my last question here, because now we know how to, at least the elements of the assessment. You are there now. You have your pretty PowerPoint with all the facts, all the presentation. We are ready to go. But I guess you have been in that point or in that iteration with companies numerous times. When you look out into the market, then sometimes things go really well. Sometimes very little happen, and sometimes things go quite badly for companies afterwards. What is your maybe reasoning behind this, but also when things go good and bad, what do you see as has been critical there? What do people need to be aware of when starting this process?
I think it's the combination of the people, processes, and the tool, bringing that together. That you need to have both, because you could say if you have a perfect say project around the processes, change management, etc., and you sort of focus on that because you say it's the people side we need to fix in order to fix this. It's all about the people. But if you don't anchor it in any tool, then you'll just have a lot of discussions and debate, but you won't really do anything, because how do you operationalize a certain strategy, for example, stocking strategy, if you don't have a tool for it? On the other hand, if you just have the tool, you'll equally fail, likely to fail, because you'll have the tool, it'll be standing over there in the corner somewhere. It will be calculating all sorts of optimal things. But if people don't use it, if they that's behavioral side, they just do something else. So they basically plan based on their Excel spreadsheets still. So I think that's the main two pitfalls. Would be either focusing entirely on the on the process people side, or entirely on the tool side. It needs to be a combination, and for that combination to work, one thing is you need the right tools. So you need to make sure to make a good assessment, see it, be able to make sure that it's proven, that it can actually do what it is you need it to do, and there is a business case behind it. So seeing and not PowerPoints. That's on the tool assessment.
Yeah.
And then on the people assessment, making sure, of course, you have the management support. That is absolutely key. And then acknowledging when you have resistance, of course, working with it as good as you can, finding, when is the resistance actually due, is resistance in the organization, when is that due to actually some good points that you need to take into account when you build the model. So having that, again, that respect for the knowledge, and especially, of course, the people who've been there for a longer period of time, who have normally the most annoying questions, right, that will sort of hamper you, but can't we just do this? No, because you need to listen in and say, okay, maybe they actually do have a point, and we need to be able to fix that problem as well. And then, of course, try to convince them as much as possible in basically using arguments and examples and showing it. And then at the very last resort, using that management attention, of course, if you really can't get things moving. But that would be the last resort.
Yeah. Interesting. I think time is moving fast here, but just to leave it on a silver lining maybe here in the end, because we have talked about a lot of elements here, but end of the day, this is worldwide doing, I guess. In your experience, you see a lot of potential, a lot of achievements from companies, a lot of improvements using this methodology, I guess.
Absolutely, and it's surprising how much is the same topics that companies struggle with. Across there is a lot of similarities in behavior being a big problem, not having the right tools, not having the transparency, not being data driven, having these endless discussions without the facts. So have the facts ruin the discussion instead, and let's get moving. That's really what I would recommend. Yeah.
Perfect final words. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for all your input here today. It's an exciting topic for us. We could talk for hours on this, and we will, because another series coming up shortly around the same topics, again, diving into more elements around this. So thank you all very much out there for listening in today. Any feedback, input you might have, feel free to reach out. You can find us through the website. Other than that, have a great day out there, and we hope to see you all soon again.